Hello, class. I hope some of you that have just been added to the class, I hope you've bought the book for the class and you've spent some time trying to read some of those things, read some of the chapters, read some of the key points. And usually, I give quizzes, and most of the quizzes are directly from the book. Just because there are certain constraints that at least I want students to be able to have access to the information. And much more, I feel okay when students know the material. And also, I give study guides so that students can know specific areas of interest, those things that I really want you to know. Because this is just for some, this is just the only semester you might be taking a class of this nature. But at the same time, you should make the best of it. So today we're going to study contemporary health, lecture 7, sociology and health. And maybe most of you have taken some sociology classes. You know what sociology is all about. Most of the time it deals with people interaction, people's culture, people's beliefs, people's value systems. And create that link between those value systems, their culture, how those things play in their understanding of health and how do they deal with health related issues. You see, because most of the time we are individuals that deals with experiences. Some of our experiences might not be the most helpful experiences, but but at the same time, they help us to, they act as a kind of a map, a roadmap as to how we deal with the issues. Our thought processes. How does this impact the community in which we live? Or what are some of the issues within our culture that really contribute to our health situation? So we are going to see the link between our sociology, our culture, our experiences, our belief system. How do all of this contribute to helping us decide as to our understanding of health and illness? So to explore sociology as a discipline, first of all, what you have to bear in mind is whenever you talk of public health, always know that public health is a multidisciplinary subject. You see, in public health, you study biology, you study philosophy, you study sociology, you study psychology. You see, because all of these things play in the way human beings react or relate to issues. Now, to identify how sociology contributes to the understanding of health and illness, to identify how society affects health. What is sociology? You see, because as I said in previous lectures, we have to define the words we use. Because until we define those words, people can add their own meaning and whatnot and just create a mess. But once we define what we are talking about, what we are talking about will be in the framework of our definition. So for this class, what is sociology? It's the study of interaction between groups and individuals. Interaction, relationships, family members, church, people going to the same church or the same religious beliefs, people belonging to the same fraternity or sorority. These are all, things that through sociology you can be able to explain based on their interaction. The critical examination of everyday aspects of human life. See, from birth, how do parents, how do fathers, mothers take care of their kids? What environment do these kids grow into? What are some of the the belief system that they have? What are some of the resources within the community? And what are some of those that are considered valuable? What are the traditions? You see, because again, when you start talking of culture, there are certain traditions. See, again, in some cultures, there is the issue of for women to pass on to be more and grown-ups or adults. They encourage genital mutilation. Everything being normal based on scientific studies, it's irrelevant and exposes young girls to infectious diseases and in some cases even not being able to bear kids. But it's part of the culture. Who are we to say, okay, that culture is barbaric? The only way we can be able to address some of those issues is to slowly educate people, slowly try to provide options. And try to also show them some of the realities, the impact of that behavior, the destructive tendencies. And also in certain societies, you have their belief system. In most cases, the culture does not have any area wherein there is a relationship between the pathogen and the illness. Most of the time is superstitious beliefs because everything is explained to a great extent based on the type of interaction. that takes place within the population. If somebody had a very wretched interaction with someone and one of those people gets ill, most of the time they consider that person could have done something to them to lead to their illness, which in a way is not true, but the culture has some ways to rationalize some of these interpretations. The examination of the macro and the micro aspects of society and their interrelationship. Macro, the big, micro, small. Certain aspects of society, how do they really, what is the relationship? To families and the community at large. What are the expectations of the bigger society? And how those expectations, how do they affect the family, the small groups? The exploration of social processes and how society works. Again, social processes, the traditions, their belief systems. And yes, in some of our society, we still have some of those belief systems that are far from right. Here we are today in the 21st century, we are still dealing with some people thinking that Black people, Hispanics, and some other groups are inferior to white. When with all the research that has been done, biology and all the other have come up with no difference. If there are any differences, they are so minute, and most of those differences are created by human beings or the localities in which people live. But yet still, because of power, people still promote some of those beliefs. And today we see how those belief system has contributed to the way resources are provided for minorities. What type of resources are provided? What sort of justice system is placed for those people? So these are some of the social processes that contribute to health inequality, health disparities, disparities in education. The minorities are not inferior. If given all the equal resources, the resources that they need, most of the time they will outperform whites. But because of some of those pro-social processes, those in power, they give a tacit kind of, oh, we don't this, but in reality, at the end of the day, is the resources that are needed by minorities and other groups are not there. Or if they are there, they are not there in a way wherein it could be able to, it will be able to address some of the inequalities. So society, to a greater extent, they construct certain things and hold on to them. Race is a social construct. See, and most of the time it's again just the idea of women are inferior to men. Just for the mere common sense. Women gave birth to men. Men cannot give birth to any other species. It's only women that have that possibility, that ability to do that. And women are the first people to really take care of men. But within the process, within the culture, they come up with these crazy ideas that women are inferior to men. At times, quote certain crazy verses from the Bible, which at the end of the day have no relevance to support those ideas. These are all social constructs. The use of theory as a tool to explain society. See, one thing about education or people who have studied so much, they always develop certain theories. Theories more or less provide a framework under which society is being studied. Thinking sociologically about society. Sociology has been called the science of society. Again, sociology has been called the science of society. Sociologists use their sociological imagination when exploring society. The sociological imagination is about thinking beyond personal experience and challenging obvious explanations of human actions. See, this is very, very important. The sociological imagination is about thinking beyond personal experience and challenges and challenging obvious explanations of human actions. So we have to go beyond the personal and challenging obvious explanations of human actions. Thinking sociologically is about using systematic inquiry and the familiarizing situations, and the familiarizing of societies or situations. You have the theoretical perspective. Again, theory frames, you have the functionalist theory, function, doing. See, society is seen as a functioning biological organism, which is true, with individuals acting as parts, and as they all have a role and function, which is true. We are all biological organisms, living organisms, with individual acting as part of that society. And also each individual having a role and function to play. Everyone does not bite. Everyone does their bite to keep society running, or everyone does their bit to keep society running. Everybody does their role to keep society running. As father, you do your role as a father. As mother, you do your role as mother. As child, you do your role as a child. As professional, you do your role as a profession. As leaders, you do your role as leaders. We all have our own responsibilities to making sure that society runs. Now, persons seek role theory. Now, the medical profession manage the disruption caused by sickness. The medical profession manages the disruption caused by sickness. Patients adopt the sick role and can abstain from work and their usual responsibility. Again, these are when you're sick, you adopt the sick role depending on how sick you are and can abstain from the work and their usual responsibilities. That's the medical, profession or the sick role theory. When you're sick, see, that in itself is a possible theory. But think about the reality of those minorities who rely on paycheck, who do not have the ability to work at home using internet. Is it possible they can abstain from work and their usual responsibilities? I don't think so. And that's why when you think of the devastation that this COVID has caused among minority, because they are in the service industry, they provide service. And some of them cannot afford not to go to work, even when they are sick. Because if they don't go to work, they lose their salary. And when they don't have enough that salary, or that salary is not good to, is not enough to take care of their responsibilities, they find themselves in a challenge or in a pickle, as people will say. And most of them would rather, even those sick, would rather go to work and hoping that they don't fall dead, because they have a role to play. And at times it's difficult for them to assume that sick role. Again, why is society structured in this way, wherein there is so much disparities, so much inequalities within the work system? Some people can stay home and do whatever they can to stay safe, to stay free from contracting the COVID. But others, if they try, they will be trying to solve one problem and creating a much bigger problem. And in some cases, that's why when you look at the statistics, a lot of minorities have died as a result of this COVID virus because they cannot afford to stay home. They have to serve the bigger population. And the process, not having all the right sort type of equipment to protect themselves, they expose themselves to disease. And not having the necessary, either the healthcare system, most of the time it takes some time for them to seek medical care. And by the time they go for medical service, it's too late. Outcome is death. Again, sick role theory is great for some people, but for some people, it serves no use. To adapt the sick role, patients have to desire to gain full health and return to work by seeking treatment. Okay, the theoretical perspective, continuation. The symbolic interactionist theory, the microanalysis, attempting to understand social experiences from the perspective of those experiencing them. Encounters and interactions are what create meaning in the social world. Encounters and interactions are what creates meaning in the social world. I say most of the time you can see, especially last year, the summer was spent dealing with so much protest because there were certain group within the society that felt neglected and they have to raise their voices. Black Lives Matter, in the racist tendencies of some police and some people in the police system or in the legal system. And based on some of those, has helped to come up with certain things that needs to be done to address some of those issues. You have the insider perspective focus upon the subjective experience of illness. Now we have the Kaufman's work on stigma is important. Illness can lead to stigma and affect individual identity. There are certain illnesses. Have HIV, ooh, that's a stigma. You are likely to face discrimination. You are likely to face rejection by even some of your family members. Or mental health related issues. all of these are things that can affect individual identity. Judgment about illness are value laden. It depends on the sort of disease. And this also becomes even worse when you're thinking about Western countries. And some developing countries that have not created that link between the pathogen or the lifestyle behavior that contributes to the illness, because they explain certain things based on superstition. Stigma can result from physical differences and stereotyping. Say from physical differences, especially the handicapped. And at times, even the obese people. People call them different types of names. People with addictions. See, because most of the time is up to the point wherein, addiction is established. The individual is almost to a point wherein they've lost control over the situation. And society, most of the time, develops certain stereotypes. Oh, they are lazy, they are this, they are that, just not to take time to really know that, okay, you don't blame the person who is ill. You try to find ways to help that person who is ill or who is dealing with a situation rather than blame. Many illnesses are associated with stigma, including HIV/AIDS, mental illness, and Down syndromes. Theoretical perspective. Birds. Work discusses chronic illness as biographical disruption. Individual illness disrupts the life experience of sufferers. Yeah. Illnesses affect daily structures and taken for granted assumptions about everyday life. Sufferers have to deal with biographical disruption, such as limiting work and their participation in normal activities, such as family life and social events. Sufferers develop mechanisms to manage these disruptions, coping skills, how to cope with some of the challenges that they are faced with. Disruption led to destabilization of identity, especially at the onset of the chronic disease or illness. So most of the time when somebody is just diagnosed of a certain disease, there is that kind of, your identity is almost challenged. But later on, you develop ways to cope with it. Now, because of the nature, we've gone through some of this theoretical perspective. I would like us to end at this theory because of the Marxist theory. because that in a way is so important for you to really understand the role of capitalism within society and how it impacts people. So I will end the lecture here and we'll start on this slide and the next day that we meet. And in the meantime, you take time to again, some of these are interesting chapters. Take time to read, especially with the sociology. This is really, it's really an important chapter. So please take time to read it because you will really like and give you a better understanding as to why things are the way they are or why people behave when it comes to health, discussing health related issues, why people behave the way they do. It's very important. See, people always have a framework that they use when they're dealing with issues. And the more you understand that framework, where they're coming from, the better you can really